Deborah Gist will be known to many of you. She's the the Commissioner of Education in Rhode Island, was formerly an honorable member of the education community here in Washington, D.C., and a leader here. Deborah, when you look at the McKinsey report and you think of your own challenging task in improving performance of Rhode Island as a state, what are the lessons you draw from it? What are the things that you think are most important for your role as a state superintendent or a commissioner of education?
Well, the first thing I would say is just to echo what you've heard already about the report, which is the good news that is in the report, because I am eternally optimistic about what we're doing as a country and certainly what's happening in Rhode Island. And so for me to have tangible examples of systems, large ones, because so frequently when we talk about success, we're looking at individual schools or smaller subsections. To see large systems in which we can say that they've made sustained improvement over time and within a reasonable period of time, a period of time that I think our communities can really wrap their arms around, that's really encouraging to me. I also thought that in looking at the interventions that the systems undertook in each of the different phases, and I'm very curious, I'm going to have to follow up with Mona to figure out where we are looking at the data. I have a pretty good idea, but obviously would want to take a closer look at that. And then looking at the interventions that the systems put into place, there are so many pieces that are very familiar. I think it will be familiar to everyone here, certainly familiar to the Secretary, because they're reflective of some of the work that's happening in the country right now, and certainly the work that's happening in Rhode Island. So just as an example, if you look at the 6 common interventions that were consistent across all of the systems, they almost look like a description of the race to the top, or of the work that many of the reform efforts that are taking place in many of our states and districts are doing. So that was very encouraging as well. Obviously, the point about sustainability isn't lost on any of us. I think that many of us talk about that a lot, and hope that someone will share that with my new governor, because I'm really looking forward to staying in Rhode Island for a long time and working closely with him to keep our reform efforts going, because I really, you can see that once you're into something for a couple of years that you've just started to get momentum, and that we really need to sustain that momentum. And then the last thing I'll just say is something that it's both a comment about something that I find interesting, but also a question. And that is that when I read the description of what's happening in a system that's great, or it's moving from good to great, or great to excellent, and you start to see the autonomy and the kind of professionalism and the sharing and the collaboration that's happening among educators, I think as a longtime educator, that's what excites me. And so I'm encouraged by that, because that's what I want for the educators in our system. The question that I have is about, it seems pretty clear that there's a pathway that systems take that do start more tightly controlled and move to that. And what I'm wondering about is, I'd love to have a discussion with folks about that, because I've often been concerned that when we are more prescriptive, we tend to keep our great educators from performing at their best, and sometimes keep them from wanting to be in our systems. And this has been a dilemma that I've had for a number of years. In fact, I know Bill Haidt is here, and it's a conversation about, in Prince George's County, they're doing sort of the earned autonomy, which I think is still what you all are doing, which is reflective of what this report is showing. So good for you guys. But I've always felt like autonomy should be something that, if we're going to hold people accountable, that we should give to them. And this seems counter to that. So it was a big lesson for me, and something that I would really love to hear about.
This point about leadership continuity, the only thing that seems to turn over faster than US superintendents are UK Secretaries of State for Education. We had actually, between 1993 and 2001, when we made the most progress, we had 2 for that 8-year period. And since then, we've had 5 in 9 years. And I do think that is a real issue and a challenge that every system has to face up to. Carl and his successor cover, I think, 17 years in Long Beach, and that sustained Long Beach way really depended on that leadership consistency.